Hello, I'm Gary Greenwood. Today we're going to be testing the low light capabilities of the Panasonic HC-X1000. Now I'm putting this camera up against another Panasonic camera, the 151, which, as anybody who owns one will know, is fantastic in low light. So putting it up against the 151 is a bit unfair, but in the real world we need to know what this 4K camera can do in low light. Now a few days ago I went to a Panto rehearsal for Aladdin, which is a show I'm going to be filming a bit later in the week. So I took both the 1000 and the 151, stood them in the same positions, side by side, so I can compare the shots. And here's the results. Now for most of the show, the lighting is perfectly adequate that you don't need to use gain at all. Of course the X1000 needs much higher F numbers than the 151 does. I've done minimum grading on these images. I've just slightly darkened or lightened the image to make them match more. As you can see, in these extreme light conditions, there's not really a lot of difference in the picture. But you can reframe the shot and scale in using 4K, which is why we're using 4K on a HD timeline in the first place. Needless to say, you don't lose any picture quality at all. And now we come to using dB. Here we're using 14 dB. There is a bit of grain in the picture behind the characters, but it's acceptable. The 151 hasn't even hit open on the F numbers yet. However, looking closely I can still see some grain on the 151 picture, though not nearly as much. When you're using low dB, say lower than 12 dB, you can't really see any grain at all in the X1000 on a HD timeline. It's only when you start using high dB that you actually start seeing some grain. But even then the grain is hardly noticeable on a HD timeline until you start artificially scaling into the picture. Possibly making scaling in a little more limited on high dB. This is ultraviolet, extreme low lighting. I had to pump the gain on both cameras to great heights. Pumping the grain to 12 dB is grainy enough on the 151. I had to push the super gain button on the X1000, which is about 27 dB. And in editing I had to raise the highlights quite a bit on the X1000 image to get anything watchable at all. Okay, after seeing that film, we've pretty much discovered that the HC-1000 can pretty much match the 151 if you're willing to use dB. The grain isn't really that bad when you're using high dB on the X1000 if you put it on a HD timeline, and that's the key. Right, let's take this to the next step. Let's set up a few toys in front of this computer. We'll have candlelight, so I'll have very low light, and we'll test the cameras side by side, fully open with the F numbers, just using dB. So we'll start with no dB, 6, 12, up to the max that the cameras will do. Okay, we're starting off with both cameras fully open with no dB. I've got a very dark image here with just a very little light on from a distance. Now you probably can't see this, but on the 151 you can still see gain in the picture at this low light, even though we're not using dB. Okay, now we're on 6 dB on both cameras. There is a little bit of gain on both images, but nothing serious. Now we come up to 12 dB. The gain on the 151 is quite bad, but still okay. You can't really go above 12 dB on the 151. As you can see on the 1000, we're up to 18 dB now. The gain is quite bad, but still okay. 24, the gain is now matching the 12 dB on the 151. You can go up a little further on the 1000 using the super gain button. Okay, this is the super gain button, which is 27 dB. As you can see, the gain on both cameras is quite bad at this level. I'm sorry I keep saying gain instead of grain on that film. As you can see, the H1000 is far behind the 151 with light levels. However, I am surprised that the use of dB allows the camera to keep up with the 151 without too much of the dreaded grain. You still get it, but it's manageable. Using the cameras, that's a different story. On the side of the camera there's a little wheel, a gain button, a white balance button and a shutter button. So you have to push the gain button and then you can use your wheel to go up and down. Now in the menu you can set where the gain starts, so you can have it like 6 dB or 12 dB or 18 dB, wherever you choose in the menu. When you push the gain button, that's where it starts. So I would probably use about 9 myself, I'd have thought. You push the gain button and suddenly the picture will pump up to 9 dB. Then you can use the wheel to go up or down, and it goes up and down by 1, so you can go 9, 8, 7, 6 for instance. But the problem is with the wheel, on the 151 it's quite large, and the wheel on the 151 does the iris, and it's very smooth and easy to use. But on the HC-1000 it's quite small. So imagine working in a theatre like I was. You've got to find the gain button by touch, and it's a bit recessed as well, so it's very difficult to find. So you push that, you get your gain, then you've got to move the little wheel up and down to alter your gain. And all this time this is real live recording, so you might lose a little. Try and fiddle around with little buttons like that. It's a bit of a disappointment. Because we're using so high resolution, you can see all the blemishes on my face for the first time. When I've been sat watching it, I've been going, ah, I look ugly. Well, that's the price you pay for high resolution. Okay, so what conclusions have we got? First of all, we know that this camera can keep up with a 151 by using dB. The grain isn't too bad if you put on a HD timeline. If you just want 4K footage, I don't think this camera's for you at all. If you're using it and put on a HD timeline so you can reframe your shots, you can zoom in a bit, you can pan across a static shot, things like that, I think it's a great camera to have. Okay, the next video, we're going to be looking at editing all this 4K footage on a computer designed for HD workflow. So do you have to change your computer, or will your computer designed for HD be able to edit this 4K footage? Well, we'll have a look. If you've got any questions of anything, just put them in the comments below and I'll try and answer them, or make a little film to show you and things like that. Okay, thanks for watching.